Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Album Spotlight, the show where I put the spotlight on a new album in progressive rock that I've been wanting to talk about. I feel like I haven't done as many reviews this year as I normally would, kind of scaling back a little bit and trying to be more specific on which albums that I focus on, but I've been really excited about the idea of ramping up more album reviews. I want to be like the one-stop shop for all like the newest in modern prog. And so I feel like I'd love to do more and more reviews as this year rolls on. I think there's a lot of exciting new releases coming out in the next few months. So to start that off, to kick things off, I have a great album to talk about today. The Pattern Seeking Animals' new album, Grimalkin. I love Pattern Seeking Animals. Of course, they're somewhat of an offshoot of probably my favorite band of all time, Swakespeare. So of course I'm going to like this group. It's just, wired into my DNA to like Pattern Seeking Animals. And this is their sixth album, which is kind of remarkable because their first album came out in 2019 and they just, every year they crank out a new album and it's always of high quality and really excellent. So really grateful that the band is so prolific and able to release such great music on a consistent schedule. The lineup for the band, basically we have Ted Leonard on guitar and vocals, Jimmy Keegan on drums, Dave Maros on bass, and then we've got John Baghold who's doing keyboard work and is the main songwriter here. Kind of, this is his baby, this is his brainchild. John Baghold co-wrote a lot of Swakespeare tracks, like post-Neil Morse era, and he brings that sort of an aesthetic to Pattern Seeking Animals. It's kind of his outlet to be able to bring his creations to life. So a lot of the stuff that just wouldn't work in the Swakespeare wheelhouse. And I have a feeling that, kind of to me, the break-off point that formed Pattern Seeking Animals is Swakespeare's Noise Floor, where a lot of the tracks that John Baghold wrote were relegated to like the bonus disc rather than the main album. And I think he wanted to start his own project where he wasn't shuffled off into a bonus disc, into obscurity, but his tracks had the main headline for his own band. And I think that's kind of the genesis of where this all came from. Really, that's maybe my own headcanon. I think what really happened is he just had a lot of material, a lot of demos that he was working on, decided to grab a few of the Swakespeare guys to kind of demo them out and see how they felt, and then they just assembled them into an album, which was that first self-titled record. Since they enjoyed working together so much and enjoyed that record, they decided to keep moving forward with more records each year. So, and this record, Grimalkin, is a great entry point into the group. Every album is a good entry point. You could really pick any one and you wouldn't be steered wrong. I think they're all very consistent and have like this similar style and quality to them. My personal favorite of the discography is Prehensile Tales from 2020. I just really connected with that one when it came out. I liked the self-titled first record, but I felt like the Prehensile Tales was a little bit more cohesive, and they introduced a lot more proggier elements. There was some longer tracks, and there was like some long tracks on the Pattern Seeking Animals first record, but I felt like it was more dominated by the shorter, more poppier centric tracks, where Prehensile Tales kind of provided a better balance to me of like the prog world that they dipped their toes in, but also the melodic kind of hooky side to their sound as well. But since then, all their albums have been really strong. Only Passing Through was their third one. Spooky Action at a Distance was fourth. And then Friend of All Creatures. Friend of All Creatures was the first time where I felt like things were getting a little bit samey, where I was wondering if maybe it's not distinguishable enough compared to their previous work. And I think that's the danger of releasing so many records in so short a span of time. Sometimes they all kind of blend together, and it's hard for me to remember what track comes from what album, you know what I mean? Where sometimes I prefer when an album feels more distinctive and more individual, and you can separate out, okay, this is definitely the feel of that record, this is definitely the feel of this record, whereas their music has kind of all blended together in my eyes, and it's harder for me to pick out like individual songs and moments from Friend of All Creatures, but I enjoy the listening experience immensely, so I'm not criticizing it all. I think it's still super solid and has some really great tracks on it. But I felt a little bit of that fatigue of like, okay, this is great sounding, but doesn't really differentiate itself very much from their previous records. I'm not so sure. And Grimalkin, suffers a little bit of that same fate. I think it's a little bit more of a standout record compared to Friend of All Creatures. It's a little bit of a return to form, but, you know, some of those same criticisms I think still bleed through. You know, it still has that similar vibe and sound from their past, like, several records. But, you know, what I like about the band is they're always trying new things, nuances to their sound. You know, they're trying to introduce different angles and different creative measures, which makes it stand out from just your generic, like, melodic, hooky prog rock crowd. So, you know, maybe that's kind of a mixed bag, a mixed way to talk about the record, where I was somewhat disappointed at first because I felt like, okay, this is just more of the same. But as I listened to it more, the songs kind of gain their own distinctive character and stand out on their own, and I realized just how much I've been enjoying listening to the record overall. And I like Baghold's instincts to create kind of this memorable pop hooks, but build these cinematic soundscapes around it with hints of like spaghetti western and the sweeping kind of orchestrated romantic sound with proggy flourishes. It's not full-blown like over-the-top prog. They don't really do like crazy intricate, you know, instrumental chaos or anything like that. It's all very accessible. But I enjoy that. You know, sometimes you need that in your music to just be able to grab you and hook you in and not like make you feel overwhelmed by all the chaos around you. And I think their music is just really pleasing to listen to. And there's several great tracks throughout the list here. Going through track by track, Maybe All a Dream is a strong opening, has this kind of dramatic opening, but gets more energetic and proggy as it goes on with some interesting keyboard sounds. Definitely feels smooth and melodic with touches of prog here and there. And has this kind of nostalgic, kind of thoughtful vibe, a dreamlike atmosphere. There's some flute playing at the end of the track. And it's just a pleasant experience. And it definitely, when you first hear it, it's like, yep, definitely Pattern Seeking Animals. This is their sound. And I'm hooked right in. A Flower Yet to Grow feels like it's most akin to what was on Prehensile Tales. It kind of reminds me of Here in My Autumn a little bit. Great, cool groove to it. Dave Merrow's laying down that bass groove. I love it. Ted has a great passionate vocal here. There's a cool slowdown about 3 minutes in with some sweeping guitar lines and slower paced vocals. There's some guitar soloing in here, great soundscapes and cinematic feel. And I like when it comes back with the reprise of the main opening section to end out the track. So a really pleasing experience. Once again, another solid track on the list. Jade Sky is kind of interesting here. It's a shorter track. It's under 5 minutes, and it definitely brings in that spaghetti western feel, kind of as a galloping groove. There's some cool violin work and orchestrated elements. There's a bit of like almost an oriental kind of feel to the sound palette here. Great soaring violin, light vocalizations towards the end. So I find this to be a pretty unique, interesting track here, even if Ted's vocals maybe are a bit strained here on the higher end of his register. But I really like the song because it's just clever and it's kind of a unique breath of fresh air on the track list. Things I Don't Do is a pretty standard piano ballad with some tender vocals. I like the thematic elements about lost love and mourning. It's kind of a unique way to talk about that. There's some really nice accompanying female vocals, but for my particular taste, probably the weakest moment of the record. Just kind of a little bit of a throwaway ballad, but it's still pleasant to listen to. Breakaway, on the other hand, is one of my favorite tracks on the record. Just bursts with progressive power with a great proggy intro. We get a darker Ted vocal with some interesting keyboard arpeggios. This one sounds the most like modern Spocksbeard to me. Like this could have been on the Archaeoptimist. With its like soaring sounds and just playful vibe. There's a unique middle section that gives a different but still proggy flavor and a short guitar feature. And I like this classical-ish feel in the end instrumental playing. Great keyboard work, bumping bass lines. It's just a fun, uplifting, proggy track, which is just right in line with what Spocksbeard does best. So it's cool to see Pattern Seeking Animals kind of bring that sort of an aesthetic into their soundscape since they have that Spocksbeard DNA so strongly into their music. Traveler on the Wrong Road Home brings some horns into the sound, kind of that spaghetti western feel, almost this kind of like Mexican style vibe. Really interesting cinematic journey, kind of desert sounding as well. Really cool little track. I really like Ted's vocals once again, and it's just a really interesting, different sort of aesthetic with those horns. I think that brings a unique element that's really interesting, and something that John Baghold likes to play with, kind of this old-fashioned Western type sound. Then we get Slowly Falls the Flying Man, which to me is another standout track on the record. Starts with the more medieval kind of sounding classical inspiration, almost like the Baroque, like Gentle Giant type elements in this instrumental interplay that they do. Then it gets to keyboard and vocal balladry before we get more of those like Baroque sort of elements and leads to like a slow melodic rock groove. There's some cool proggy keyboards, some nice violin at parts of this, some catchy harmony vocals, some inventive and flashy prog. It just, within the 8-minute runtime, it really runs the gamut of a lot of different things. There's a lot of complexity, a lot of different layers, a lot of different types of styles and sounds that they're working with. I like the anthemic ending with almost like marching drums and strong vocalizations and this beautiful violin work. So this is a expert track. I think it's definitely one to check out. Probably one of the strongest tracks on the record, the most unique, and one that just really plays really well. And then the last track is I Dream the World, which, much like the track that I talked about, Things I Don't Do, it's kind of just a shorter, poppier track to end the record on, a little bit schmaltzy, a little bit cheesy, but pleasant enough. Kind of has a throwback 80s vibe, some unique keyboards, but not really my favorite track, but it's short and it's kind of a nice little palate cleanser after a longer, proggier track before it. So a very enjoyable listen, and some of the tracks are definite standouts. Breakaway, Slowly Falls the Flying Man are two of the band's best tracks, I think. And some of those early tracks, like Maybe All a Dream and A Flower Yet to Grow, are really solid pieces in their lexicon. It's definitely right in their wheelhouse of what they've been doing. So if you love their aesthetic, if you've loved all of their past records, go ahead and get this one. It's just as good as all the records they've come out with. Excellent playing by everyone on board, and really excited for the band's future and what they continue to do here. I'm always hopeful that on the next record, maybe they'll do some kind of a zig where you might expect a zag, but we'll see what they do. They've kind of fallen into a very signature sound, which in a lot of cases is a good thing. I like when a band has their own style and sound that's identifiable as them, but sometimes they can get stuck in a rut, and you could get into that argument of like, well, every album kind of sounds the same. What does this album do that wasn't done on their previous records? Do I really need this record? Because it's just basically a redone version of what they've come out with before. And I know some of my favorite artists get that sort of criticism, like Neil Morse himself, where a lot of people say that he just makes the same album over and over again. He has a very similar formula, and do I really need another spiritual journey concept record from Neil Morse? I do. I would listen to as many as he pumps out. But I could see that argument for Pattern Seeking Animals, that they keep pumping out the same kind of record, and maybe they aren't as distinctive as I wish they were, but it's all excellent, pleasant music. And, if you haven't heard of the band, I think this is a nice entry point to get a feel for their melodic prog sensibilities. If you like good, meaty melodic hooks, but you like some interesting cinematic soundscapes and dabbling into different, sound signatures that you might not expect, then this could be for you. So it gets my hearty recommendation. It's one of my favorite records that I've heard recently, and I'm just a big fan. I'm glad this band continues to make excellent music, and hope that they continue along the same vein. So thank you guys, and thanks for watching these episodes. Like I said, I'm hoping to do a lot more album reviews in the near future, so look out for those, and I'll catch you guys in a future episode. Bye everybody, enjoy the music.